everybody. Happy Saturday. It is time once again to let it rip. Guys, this morning, um, it's gonna get a little spicy. Um, we've been chopping it up about a variety of different controversial topics, maybe. Some of these I don't know why they have to be controversial, but some of them are. And this is one of them that I have a feeling will elicit a fair amount of opinions. But guys, before we get there, as always, as you guys are getting in, as you guys are tuning in, whether you're tuning into the live or you're catching this after the fact, what I want you guys to do is I want you to, wherever you are tuning in from, be it Facebook, the YouTubes, Twitch, Instagram, X, if we're connected to Andrew's platforms. Um, but I want you guys to drop a comment and let us know. Say good morning. Let us know where you're tuning in from. Um, Along the way, we are going to be covering a lot of ground. And so shows like this thrive when you guys engage and when you guys let us know your thoughts and opinions. Um, just one of those things. I feel the need to say in for the comment section. You guys usually aren't. This isn't a problem usually, but we haven't really done anything in the political sphere yet. So keep it cool in the comments. We're all here for the same reason. And just enjoy yourselves. Enjoying yourself does not have a prerequisite that we all agree with one another. Honestly, there may be stuff between the three of us that we don't agree with each other on, and that's cool. It's all good. Um, but yeah. So and just make sure that along the way, if we need to pause on anything, unpack anything, have any conversations, anything like that, please let us know. And last but certainly not least, before we get started, I'd like you guys to do me a favor. This is a show that's designed for having raw conversation, authentic conversation, breaking down culturally relevant topics, all of those kinds of things. And so, if you know anybody that would benefit from that kind of conversation, then I want you to do me a favor and hit the share button and share the show with somebody that you know, share the show with a friend, and all of that fun stuff. Now that the prerequisite stuff is out of the way, and I can actually be a real YouTuber with it, telling all the things that people need to do for the first 5 minutes of the episode. Um, Guys, good morning. Um, you know, T, I'm gonna kick it over to you
Mm.
this morning. Usually it's kind of nice because when with this show, I get to take more of a reactionary role than being the main voice. Usually it's you that pitches the topics that we cover and all of
Mm.
that kind of stuff. And this is one that you pitched. You are a guy that with your other channel, you've got your ear to the ground pretty heavily on what's going on in on the internet right now, and what's socially relevant and all of those kinds of things. So go ahead and set the table for us. Let us know what direction you want to start off with this conversation of politics from the pulpit.
Well, that's a broad spectrum, because you got the extremists who believe that it's totally appropriate to um, preach political views from the pulpit itself. So you got things like concerning voting and things like that. Even right now, Trump being a candidate again, you got people who are hugely a part of that, who want to support that opponent, preaching that for the pulpit. And you got this stream that thinks that politics, anything concerning state and government, should be totally separate from the church. They shouldn't exist at all. And when people do that, there's a lot of backlash. So there's always like a divide in the Christian community because, you know, it's very personal. Things like politics are very personal to people's, if you would, beliefs in some cases. You know, us even living in Colorado, being a liberal state, you know, some of that is even in some of our churches, the views of how we view certain things like sexuality and such forth are always going to be topics of contention because people feel what they feel, they believe what they believe, and they want their experience to be in church. Some are like, no, we should just be pure. The church has nothing to do with the world around us. You know, let the world figure that out. Don't bring that near. Um, Me personally, I think, like most things, there has to be balance. I believe if you are a person that votes and are into political things, I don't think you're going to hell. So we'll go ahead and just lay that groundwork there right now. I don't think that, but that's people's extremes. You're like, yeah, you're
Yeah.
crazy. You're a bigot. You're going to hell. Like, what's wrong with you? However, I don't think the other extreme that you have the right to push political agendas also in the pulpit. And if people don't comply those certain viewpoints, they're not going to hell either. You know, because it also goes that way. It's not ironic that you don't get behind this. You didn't vote. You did this. Yeah, you see, you're something wrong with you. I don't think such treatment is okay either, but it does leave the question of what do we do when things always are constantly changing politically, when there's certain laws being passed that where we like it or not can affect us, when there's certain fights that truthfully we may not need to rally behind. um I think the biggest one that is like finally dying down, maybe, I feel like, but still a issue, but I just love how it is like really catched on fire. What happened was the whole Israel and Gaza thing. When that happened, oh man, the surge of YouTube videos were incredible and TikToks.
Yeah.
You know, the people were running a mile. This is prophetic. This is a prophetic promise coming to pass, and you should be on this side because see, God's doing this for His people, His
Mhm.
Jews.
Yep.
And then there's our radical side of, well, you know, they're kind of just murdering people. You know, are they actually right? you know,
Right.
and then it was a lot going on. And so I'll just give you some examples of, again, here goes a political agenda in the Christian world. And I say Christian world, not saying that we're isolated, but just for lack of better words, I don't like saying it this way, but just how people categorize, for lack of better words, genre, if you would.
Yep.
If you know, you're on YouTube and TikTok, it's more of a genre. It's a lifestyle for us, genre for others.
Yep.
Um, yeah, it was a lot going on, and so those are some of the things that when I was thinking about this topic, I'm like, well, this is a big deal. Should we be doing this? You know, and how do we do it if we're going to live in a world where things are changing and where governance structures are constantly being looked at and challenged, and they do affect us. And so that's the table being set. You got your drink. I put a little bit of meat on the table, and now we gotta decide if we don't want to eat the king's meat and what we're going to get rid of and what we're going to put back on the table to make sure that we can eat this edibly.
So real quick, Ant, before you let it rip, I saw the journey that your face went on with something that T said. Um, when I first, so the running joke is that Andrew has me on Misfits because I make Andrew look like a moderate. And I will try to approach this whole topic with a little bit of grace and a little bit of mercy. But the reality is that there is a Christian school of thought that says that if you vote as a Christian, you're wasting your time. I don't know as though I ever said you're going to hell, but that like it is closer to an extremist anti Christians having anything having to do with
Mhm.
politics sort of perspective. That for as much as we talk about, I personally wouldn't classify the other end of it as extreme, but I'm also
Mhm.
coming from an entirely different perspective here, being on the East Coast. Um, but yeah, that's the other side of the pendulum swing, that like if you get involved in politics, you're wasting your time and you don't actually understand what it means to be a Christian.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, yeah.
we all
Interesting.
know, everybody who knows me knows I got a mile a minute, so I'm gonna go ahead and let you
Mm-hmm.
roll first, Amp, before I take over the conversation.
Well, I think the big thing, like for me, when it comes down to politics, is it doesn't have to become this point of contention. Like TC was saying, is like, why do I have to force my views either one way or the other on other people?
Mm,
Um, if you do, you're darned if you do, you're darned if you don't, right?
right.
Whichever side of that coin you take, you know, what I believe is that we should be focusing on, okay, what again upholds our Christian values,
Mm-hmm.
and what are those values? What are those things? You know, um, and when you're voting or not voting, whether you are there's a certain issue, the issues to me are where the problem comes in, because people have their interpretation of the issues, and sometimes we add in our interpretation of an issue as God's point of view to the issue. And I think when that happens, now we force people to pick a side,
Mm,
and a person says, well, that's not fair because I don't agree with that. I don't think that that's God's, priority. Or another person says, well, if you don't, then you're not a Christian, right? And
mhm,
it's like, here we go. And so when it comes down to, and being senior pastor for some years now, I've never spoken of any political uh, points of view from the pulpit. My goal is to teach the word of God. My goal is to, love on people, build them up, guide them in their understanding of the word. And then when they go into the world around them, they are to use the word and that wisdom to make decisions and choices, you know, on their own. Can I give guidance? Yes, of course. But my guidance is going to go back to like, okay, well, you know, what is the character? What is the heart of Jesus in these things?
mm,
Even if I'm a person who's right about something, Jesus had a way of being right that still didn't push people away unless they
mhm,
were intent on coming against him. We know the Pharisees, sometimes that was their goal, was we're going to trap him. We're going to set him up. We're going to trip him up. And when it comes down to politics, it seems like the mindset that
mm,
people are in. Well, what do you think about this? Well, why are you asking that? What are you trying to do? What are you trying to bait me into? Why are you asking about this particular subject and trying to draw me into these? And so that's my main issue with
Yep.
politics and the pulpit, is that when it's used to bring about dissension and contention, it's like, well, why are we doing that? Why do we even have to talk about that? I'm the same way about sports, right?
mhm,
Sports can get the same way.
Yeah.
I'm telling
Yeah.
you the truth. It could get the same way
Oh,
where people
oh
are
mhm,
yeah.
like, "No, well, if you don't like my team," and you're like, well, it's not your team. it's,
Yeah.
right.
it's not your
Well,
team. It's the team you root to.
Yeah.
Oh, your team sucks. Okay, and it's like there was a time where well, your team's, and it turned into this whole thing. And so politics has that same feel to it, where it
Yeah.
seems like it's always at a place where it's stirring up contention, stirring up tension and fights. And it's
Yeah.
like, why do we have to do that? Why is that the only way we can talk about these subjects? So
mm,
I'll leave it there, and we'll circle back around to uh, some of the issues there.
All right.
mm,
Um, so, um, T, I wish I could say that some of the things that you said were extreme or fading away.
mm,
So on my main show, Buddy Walk with Jesus, we just wrapped up doing a series in the Book of Esther.
mm,
Um, you want to bring out the anti-Semitism in
Mhm.
folks, do a whole book on that's mainly centered around Jewish custom.
Mm.
Just being honest, and that's not, guys. For those of you watching, if you guys are part of the Buddy Walk community, if you're watching, please don't think I'm taking a shot. I'm not taking a shot, but for every good and positive interaction that I have as a result of the show, there's the other side too. Um, oh, it's still very relevant. The whole stand with Israel, don't like this and that, like the back and forth of that aspect of it, um, is still, if anything, it's kicking back up because now we're heading into another round of elections. We're heading
Mhm.
into another conversation centered around Trump. We're heading into another conversation, and honestly, I don't really want to make it about make the Christian side of politics about Trump, because if it wasn't Trump, it would be somebody else. We've seen it,
Oh yeah. Oh
like
yeah.
and like dating back to um when I was the youngest. Oh, who was the first? Was it Reagan? That was the first one that I remember.
Hmm.
I think maybe. I don't know. But that was always a thing. So I don't want to make it around one guy or anything else like that. So I'm going to swing for the fences and start from here. I'm going to go ahead and say something spicy straight out the gate and then circle back to it. If you want to vote, if you want to get involved in the political sphere and all that kind of stuff, whatever. Go in peace. I don't care. Whatever. Do what you got to do. When it comes to the church, when it comes to the church walls, especially if you're watching and you have the holy responsibility of ministering God's word and taking the pulpit or shepherding the flock or anything else like that, leave your politics at the door. Your politics do not belong in the pulpit in any way, shape, or form. Let me say that again. Your politics don't belong in the pulpit. What does your politics have to do with the word of God? Now,
Mm.
hold the phone, because how you vote can be influenced by this, that, and the other thing. Your ethics can carry over into the political sphere. That's not what I'm talking about. Aces, if you are voting based off of something, okay, again, go in peace, do what you got to do. But when it comes to espousing your opinion, there's a reason why there is a stereotype that people think that Christian means Republican. Now, that may be a little bit more resonant with you, Ant, than you, TC, because you're from this side of the country. And for as much as over there, it's like, I don't know, syncretism is the big thing out there. Like everything is part of the melding pot. You know, you can have all of these spiritual things, and you throw this into the pot, and Jesus means that, and all this kind of stuff out on the West Coast, or at least the further west that you get. Out here, it is very much that true grit, that nationalistic, that you're, if you don't do things like acknowledge politics or acknowledge military or acknowledge those things, then you don't understand what it means to live in God's chosen country. So the reality, though, is I say these things tongue in cheek. And yeah, you know what? I'm trying, guys, y'all tune in. Let us know where where you're watching from. Are we even live here? Is this thing on? Like, guys, jump in the conversation. I am trying a little bit to jump into some bits to rile some people up. and all of that kind of stuff. I'll just pull the curtain back and say, yeah, I'm trying to play a little bit of the heel on this conversation, because anybody who knows me knows when it comes to a conversation about politics and the pulpit that the stereotype is that I'm going to be the heel in the conversation. So I say all of these tongue in cheek, but the reality is that we have to acknowledge the fact that any measure of melding those worlds, any measure of preaching that from the pulpit, damages somebody and distracts at the very least. If we're not even talking about damage, at the very least, it distracts from Jesus. And if we are distracted, and I'll leave it here, if we are distracted from Jesus in the kingdom, then what in the wide world of sports is the point of even coming together for service?
Yeah, I think those are very distinct lines. The pulpit and politics. I think what happens is, and like you said, Joe, growing up on the East Coast, even down south, if you were East Coast, down south, you know, um, speaking about the issues that are happening in our cities, our communities, our neighborhoods, got tangled up with some type of political, agenda behind them.
Yeah.
If you're in the neighborhood, especially, growing up in an African American neighborhood, if, kids were dying from drugs, you would hear that preached in church that, you know, uh, we've got to go out and save our youth. As Christians, we got to go do this, we got to do that, we got to, be more active in our communities. The Lord doesn't want to see our children dying in the streets, and you would see messages crafted to speak to those issues, and um, they would call them prophetic messages because they're speaking, to the issues in the environment. But then, those same type of issues would then become, so this person is a pastor. It wasn't a thing for that pastor to then run for an office. That pastor would then take that platform that they've been using because they got this huge church full of people that now, well, if I run, I've got a whole backing automatically.
Right.
And I know people are probably thinking, no, that doesn't happen. It did. I've seen it. That was kind of like the
Yeah.
norm. You know, that's how a lot of the names that we know today are who they are.
Right,
The Reverend Jesse Jackson.
yeah,
You know, these different individuals, they spoke to issues in the communities, in the cities, and then they use that as a platform to go into the political realm. And it was almost like a thing that you were supposed to do. That if you are a pastor, you're supposed to be on city council. You're supposed to be, having some type of connection with the government officials. Like a pastor, you're supposed to be rubbing elbows with presidents and governors and senators and all that kind of stuff. And so uh, I don't know if people can conceive a world where that is not normal, right?
right,
From a certain standpoint, like you said, for us in this generation, it's not as pervasive. But if you go back 20, 25 years, it was that was the norm. That was the norm. And, they bring in their local candidate into the church, right, on a Sunday morning and have them speak, and vote for him after service, kind of thing,
When when you would
right.
go when so for people that are of a particular vintage and into media and all of that, especially TV shows, if you notice, take notice of um, episodes that centered around a political campaign. and how there would be a scene usually where they would be up in some kind of hall speaking or some kind of building speaking, where that's based out of, like where that idea became normative for that generation of media, is what Ant's talking about. That it really would be, you cart this person in front of the congregation, or if you weren't meeting in a church, if you were meeting in like a town hall building, civic center, that sort of thing, you kind of bring them into there, and that was just how things were, you know.
Right. I don't know. 'Cause I even playing back to the civil rights movements, what I'm pretty sure Ant was going to eloquently talk about as well, because it even starts there. Well, most civil rights movements, Martin Luther King, we just celebrate him, was a reverend, and he had to speak to political injustice that the African Americans were facing at that time. And so I don't know. I'm gonna go ahead and say I agree, but I have to say this as well, that for us to be completely ignorant about political changes is not wise either. And so that's why I think I'm looking at it, is that, yeah, Sunday shouldn't be your slugfest of agenda driven anything, but to not point to what's going on around us, because people in our churches are living these things, are wondering what they should do, I think is also, and this might be unpopular, I think is unwise. I think, no, we shouldn't be pushing what to vote for, because that's an individualistic choice, but to not be aware of social climates, to not be aware of things that are affecting people daily, and to sit down and be able to conversate about what your stance should be, is very, in my opinion, not the greatest thing. And we've done that in the church. No, we don't preach politics from our pulpit. Absolutely not. We're not going to tell you vote for Trump or Biden if if that's what people are looking for. No, but we've had morning copies where we talked about a lot. Man, I'm just going to pick on a couple that have transpired already. I remember when the whole same-sex marriage was going on. We talked about that in our church. We talked about what our views and our stance should be biblically. Because if I don't talk to no one about it, then I think it might be okay to push my agenda on it. So I have to have a conversation about it. So I don't agree with the fact that you can't talk about it in the church. That's crazy. Because we talk about everything else in the church. So that means we have to mute everything else that we talk about, because that's a part of our life. And so the problem is, like I said, the extreme is that since politics are a part of my life, in a sense of in a way, I either force it on people or I'm completely oblivious to it, and I say it doesn't matter, keep it out of the church. Problem is, you're gonna find people that it affects, that they believe something's true, and if you can't have a conversation about it, you can't begin to even unpack if something is theologically wrong or being abused. And so I never like the extreme facts that we can't talk about it, because I feel like you should be able to talk about anything in a safe environment in the church. The church is the safest place you should talk about it. And so, yeah, and then I also don't want to dismiss those efforts, because he did list a good couple of greats that did cause change. Now, are we going to say they were wrong for using that power to bring about change? I don't think it's so white and black anymore. Because like I said, this is starting in even the civil rights movement. If we want to really go there, Martin Luther King was a pastor. He was having most of these speeches, not only just in city halls, he having them in church, and it brought about change. So we're going to say that's wrong? Well, hold the phone. That's not necessarily always black and white. There's color everywhere. And that's why using my stance is, where's the color in this? Where can we that's not cool? And where do we say, okay, we might need to talk about this, because the things around us might need change, because they're not just a threat to us in the Christian community, they're a threat to the world, and this is how God might feel about it and what he might want the stance to be. But we don't have the conversation, we can't even get that far.
Real quick before we get going, I got a lot to say. welcome back from the pits. I went through and unbanned you.
Right.
My bad about that, Brenda. But good morning. Glad you are with us.
It's Brandon.
G Berry, good morning.
Morning.
Glad you guys are with us. For to catch you guys up, we are talking about politics from the pulpit. We are talking about, does it have a place in church? All of those kinds of things.
Joe, before you get rolling, I kind of, want to. Is there how do we define politics
There you go.
versus, speaking to the issues in our community? Where's
Right.
the line?
There you
Because
go.
So yeah,
when you started naming people, TC, they were speaking to issues in the community,
right.
and then it evolved into politics.
hmm
But that wasn't their
Goal,
goal.
but
So,
someone view that as
like, wait a
politics.
minute, that's not politics. When we say as a Christian, what is our stance on what's happening in our world? I don't see that as politics. I see that as, us looking at the
Right.
world around us and trying to figure out how we're to navigate it. What do we define as politics? So
Yeah.
that I think that needs to be kind of
Right.
brought
So
out.
you went exactly where I was going to go, and
Mhm.
T, I don't disagree with some of what you said. Some of it I vehemently disagree with, but other ones, like, no, like the things, the people that you mentioned, the issues that you mentioned, all of those kinds of things, even down to being able to make people feel like they can engage with somebody who has a Christian worldview about these topics and things like that, I don't disagree with. And those are all very valuable. Obviously, it goes without saying. The things that these people were standing for and advocated and all of those kinds of things. It's the tip of the iceberg and doesn't even do the topic justice to say that these are valuable and true topics of relevance and things like that have to do with people in society, not politics.
No.
That's the thing. Like, conflating those two things is a huge part of the problem when it comes to trying to put the marker down on whether or not this is something that's accurate or something that has space and relevance. There's also two words that you used interchangeably that I don't think are interchangeable: should and can.
Mhm.
Can, absolutely. Should, no. I disagree wholeheartedly, because when we're talking about politics and we leave that door open for politics, then we say anything that affects from a lawmaking standpoint, anything that affects those things, that's fair game. The social issues, that's not everything that's politics is social issue. Oftentimes in our world, social issues tend to be a part of politics. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
So opening the door to that, if you want to have a morning coffee where you're talking about
Mm,
topics and conversations and things like that,
mm,
that makes sense, especially knowing the platform of something like a morning coffee, something that is more free flowing dialogue and things like that. Um, yeah, absolutely. But when we're working with this particular subject matter, the extent in which we allow it to dominate the conversation matters more so than just about anything else when you're talking about from a social standpoint.
Right.
Because when we talk
But
about politics, it's so easy for it to become a dominant force. in the conversation, and for it to become being aware becomes being obsessed. Just
Do we?
like not talking about it. I'm going to, Ant. I think
Okay.
yeah,
Yep.
I'm going to.
Mhm.
Just like not talking about it becomes being unaware of the world around you. I'm going to use an example, then jump over to G Berry's comment.
All right, defines it.
One of the first times that I opened my mouth on in front of the microphone when it came to this conversation was one of the last um, school shootings that took place. I actually jumped on to Andrew's show, and we talked about gun rights and whether or not Christians should lay down guns and the whole thing. It was a whole conversation. You can head over to the Misfits to. I'm not going to recap it here. But Andrew was a little bit surprised because I at that point I wasn't talking about it at all. At least now I'll jump in front of the mic and have a conversation, but I wasn't talking about it at all. But I was very well informed about what the issues were and all that kind of stuff. It was pointless to have a conversation about it in my mind at that time. So these things have a way, and so I would push back on some of the language that you're using, T,
Mhm.
because it's kind of all inclusive that in spots where I'm not sure it's helpful to try and cast a wide net.
I'm just saying, from the experience I have in my world, people will combine the two.
Oh yeah,
And I get
I don't
that
disagree with you.
I get that you two are drawing the line, but people combine the two because
People will.
whoever is
Yeah.
going to be in power, they combine that with who's going to deal with social things and social climates. So much to the point, being African American, you want to vote for this person because they're going to look out for us as African Americans and the issues that we're dealing with that are social, that are affecting the very way that we live.
Right.
That's been pitched to me since I've been alive. From my house and somewhat, a little bit in the church, more so in the house. But people usually combine the two because they're not separating politics from social means and social justice. They usually combine them, unfortunately. So much to the point where while I was playing Apex at the time, they were dropping badges like Asian lives matter, Black lives matter, getting behind rally cause, and you put a badge on, they were like, why are we killing politics in the game? I'm like, well, I think that's social, not politics, but people view it that way. They view it as
Right.
politics. And so that's the only thing I'm saying is that if we can have a conversation where you can distinguish the two, because we're just shutting it down. I think you get people who go on extremes. The extremes of politics in the pulpit happen because people are not being educated, or people are taking advantage of people who are in places where people feel like they're not being heard and they have a voice and they want to do it. So those are usually where the extremes come from, is a lack of conversation that I've seen. So people don't want to even talk about it because it's so sincere and so close to their heart, like I opened up this episode about. And so that's where I'm like, what do we do about that? Not saying I have the answers. I'm just saying, what do you do about that? Because those extremes come somewhere. Where do they come from? How do we get people jumping up there and saying, do this? Or how do you get people who are pushing stuff in various places that you might live? And you're just like, look, I don't even know about. Sometimes you get people like, I don't even know what's even going on. And you're like, yeah, and you're ignorant and blah, 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 blah. And it's like, well, how do we have this conversation if there's really no rails to having it? And that's what I'm more focused on. So maybe my language, the nuances of language is probably throwing you both off, but I'm just giving you, again, perspective of where the environments I live in between school, gaming, and everywhere else, that these things are, as much as they could be taboo for the church, they're taboo in these areas as well, or they're just extreme in these areas.
Right.
But yeah, that's the only thing I'm saying.
G. Berry provided a really good definition here in the comments. Politics, the activities associated with the governance of a country or other area, especially the debate or conflict among individuals or parties having or hoping to achieve power. So I knew I probably cut you off, Ant, but I So it looked like you were going to say something, but I wanted to cover that.
Yeah. No, no, I think because um, I think at the end of the day, I guess for me, um, when we're talking about these issues as Christians, I don't see myself as talking about politics. I see myself as talking about what do we do about this as a Christian.
Right.
And if that's viewed as politics, I'm, I don't even, man, I apologize if it comes across that way, right? Because
Right.
the goal is I'm a Christian and there are certain things that affect, you know, how I live as a Christian. You know, whether we like it or not, our Bible says to pray for those that are in leadership so
Mm-hmm.
that we may live a quiet and peaceful life,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so, whether, and so when we're talking about, a school shooting, I'm my focus is not political.
Right.
It's actually as a parent, it's actually as a brother or sister of someone, and so it's not it's social. It's not political. It's not
Right.
I think, we should vote for this because this happened. Like when you were talking about a school shooting and it went to gun rights, I would not have made that jump. That would have been a far leap for me. But I guess
People
like
do.
PC is saying,
People
people just
do.
blend them.
People do.
But I
Yes.
Yes.
would never do that, and they
They
wouldn't be
blend
able
them.
to make me into doing it. They would try to get me to go there, and
Hmm.
I would
Yeah.
not go there because that's not my concern. My concern is this family that's hurting. My
Yeah.
concern is the fact that this is happening, and what can we do? I worked in a school as a campus monitor. I remember learning to do active shooter drills,
Yeah.
Yeah.
right? When they started teaching that, that was right at the end of my tenure as a campus monitor, and we actually had to do active shooter drills. We
Yep.
actually had to do bomb drills.
Yeah.
Like
Mhm.
what? We're doing a
Yeah.
bomb drill in a high school. This,
Hmm.
and crazy stuff. To me, somebody would see that as political, right?
Yeah.
To I'm seeing that as how are we caring for our children? And so I think when we're having the conversation, you say, well, what do we do about it? I think we have to draw our own line. We
Hmm.
have to stay strong in what we're talking about because
Yeah.
I don't think it's just people not talking about it that creates these extremists. I think there are people that are just extremists. I think
Yeah.
there are people that just want to get on a soapbox and talk about certain things and drive certain issues. And they'll use the pulpit to do it. They'll use the pulpit to bash people. They'll use the Bible
Hmm.
to push an agenda, and they're not doing it because they can't talk about it. They're doing it because they have the platform and they want to run for an office. So this is their opportunity with their congregation as their backing to run for an office. And so I think on a local level, on a social level, on an individual level, people are talking about things and they may not be able to articulate the difference between the political point of view and the social point of view. But I think on the, larger scale, I think people actually have agendas. They actually are purposely doing this.
I wouldn't
Yeah.
disagree with that. You know, and again, like I want to say this again. I agree. I'm a person that when I find myself in these scenarios where people are saying, "Yeah, you're pushing political jargon," I'm like, "No, I'm just standing for my convictions in the Lord."
Right.
People are suffering. I'm an African American. People are dying that are black.
Right.
I'm not going to pretend that's not happening, and I'm going to pray and and support those who are hurting because it does concern me and concerns others. But some like, well, that now you're getting political, so that means you support the laws that are going to be pushed by this individual, and that's one thing I'm saying. And so I am looking at individualistic in a sense. So I'll go ahead and be honest with you, gentlemen, because who when you feel some individualistically, you feel like I believe this, that you'll back people who are doing it. And from my experience, that's where the assault is happening at. I hear your point. You're saying that the agenda for people actually in the pulpit who are pastors have been abusing power. That's what I look at it kind of as is abusing power.
Right.
And that's a problem. I'm saying they both feed each other, because if you get enough people who feel that way, they're going to feed that person because they think that person is going to take care of the issue that is hurting them, right?
Right.
And that's the thing I'm saying. It's like, what do we do with such frailness? With with such major extremes, you got people who are going to use power. Totally agree with you. I seen that within this the beginning of this year. I just can't believe people use the pulpit to just push whatever they want and have no type of Holy Ghost or Holy Spirit conviction to be like, that could be possibly wrong, and double down on it. Like, that is like still shocking to me, right? But such is the world that we're living in, and behind those people are people who are rallying with them. Like, yeah, we agree, and this thing happens. So that's all I'm saying. So yeah.
So let me back what you're saying here, T, from closer to the world where you and I inhabit, because we are both involved with, I guess. I know you recently shook things up as far as what exactly you're doing on your channel, but you are fully well aware of the entertainment space of content creation.
Oh, absolutely.
And all of that. And I have one of my channels is purely entertainment. Like, yes, I keep it friendly, family friendly, the whole 9 yards, but like it is purely entertainment. I engage with other content creators that are in the entertainment sphere. And a friend of mine went to Twitter because he was bored. That's always a good thing to do. And posted, he does comic book content. Simple thing. What's the point in the MCU changing character power sets? And he used two characters as examples. For those of you that are into comic book content in the MCU and all of that, he used Miss Marvel, Kamala Khan, and he used Echo as the two examples. In one foul swoop, he pissed off the entire internet. Like, it was fascinating to watch this whole thing break down, because the dude's just like, from a comic book standpoint, like he approached like a nerd. Like, honestly, like he just approached like a nerd. And you, like, I had to look up some of these political jargon words that were getting thrown at him, because I just, that's not my bag. That's not my part of town. And so, like, people throwing these phrases at him, I'm like, what does that even mean? And so, like, but it went from 0 to 60 in that particular arena really, really quick. And it became, you're alt-right, you're this, you're that. It became these very hyper specific political things getting thrown out. So T, I agree. Like, we're not off the same page when it comes to recognizing. You say one thing, and that's it. You could say, guys, did you know? Did you know there are fish in the water? Well, you must be right, because you believe everything that the government tells you, that there's fish in the water and that water's wet, and you believe in salt water. Next thing you know, you want death to this entire group of people. That's just how it is, man. That's the world that we live in. So yeah, I agree with you. These things do go nuts in the court of public discourse on things like social media. That's why, as a content creator, I live in two worlds. On one hand, yeah, I engage with social media because that's part of it. That's part of ministry and things like that. On the other hand, dude, I think the world was a better place before social media. I think social media is a garbage heap. I think social media is a terrible thing, and the science proves that psychologically, social media is god awful, terrible, atrocious. Like, seriously, take a look at unbiased reporting, and I promise you, you will find that social media is a garbage heap. That being said, though, That,
Dang.
all of that being said, the thing about this conversation is, yes, I acknowledge everything that you're saying. Yes, we can stand and say, and for the record, as far as Andrew's show, yes, he was looking for somebody who was engaged in the political conversation, because that's his audience and stuff like that. And he was dealing with a bunch of people who are like, who went the other direction of like, because this school shooting happened, the answer is more guns, so that way this shooter could have been taken care of quicker, and all of that kind of stuff. And we were approaching it from a standpoint of, how do you love people? How do you think about this lovingly? How do you think about this, and trying to introduce this idea of love your neighbor into the conversation, and all of that. Yes, it took a political turn because of that, like because of the audience, and because of the platform, and things like that. But if we are going to ask that question, you asked it, T. So I'm going to hold your feet to the fire.
Go ahead.
On what you asked. How do we handle this? Then we show that there's a better way of doing it. Okay. If I'm going to use Ant for an example, right? Because he's a senior pastor at Sure Foundation. So, as a general rule of thumb, if somebody has a qualm or an issue or a concern or something like that, more often than not, people are going to think, let me go see what Pastor Anthony has to say about this. Being able to have an open line of dialogue that says, hey, I don't know what to do about this political stance or this topic or whatever. Cool. Like, great that people can feel comfortable to be able to have those conversations and all of those kinds of things. No problem. But even though the world would not draw that distinction, would not draw those lines, would not separate out social from political, it's on us to do exactly that. Separate out all of those problems that you're talking about, all of those very relevant and real and honest conversation and dialogue pieces. Absolutely. They need to be talked about. They need to be blasted from the rooftops, and not just squirreled away of, oh, if you come forward and say something like Black Lives Matter, then you must mean that you hate cops. You must mean that you stand for this. You must mean that you vote this way. You must mean this, that, and the other thing. We didn't talk about a single political stance. We didn't talk about a single party. We didn't talk about a single animal. We didn't talk about a single color. We didn't talk about any, I mean that in like red or blue. Like that sort of thing. You simply made a statement. Yeah, don't be ignorant to what your words may affect, but we've always been a species that has looked to a saving strongman to fix the problem. That's biblical.
Right. Look at Kings. I mean, what? Not King Samuel.
Like this, that's for time immemorial. But we have to be able to separate these things out, and that's why I say, when you're talking about it in a church context, no, have open lines of dialogue, sure. Social topics, okay. Political? No. And that's on. So for those of us on this panel, we're pastors, right? That means that responsibility is on you, Ant. That means that responsibility is on you, T. That means that responsibility is on me. That means that responsibility is on Pastor Joe. That means that that person dictating the pace of the conversation, that responsibility is on your shoulders. Brenda, I see your comment.
Right, our comment's good.
Yeah, I think it's good. I think it's conversation stimulating.
That's what I mean by good.
Yeah. No, I didn't want to make it sound like I was taking a shot at her comment when I paused and hesitated like that. And
Yeah.
you're leaning in like you got something to say.
Well, because I think I still feel like
Mm-mm.
we haven't drawn a line. We don't.
Mm-mm.
It's still there's still no. It's still blurred.
Mm-hmm.
And how do we unhook these so that there's a distinct difference, between what we're calling politics and what we're calling social, when it comes down to the church, when it comes down to because I was thinking about this, and I know this is probably cliche, but in John chapter 6, when they tried to make Jesus king and he disappeared on them, he kind of booked out of there.
Mm-hmm.
The idea is that, well, Jesus is like, well, that's not what I came for. I came for salvation. I came to deliver people from sin, you know. And people will say, well, see, that means you should never ever,
Right.
do anything in politics, right? But the line is so thin because there are, and I'm hoping that some of the people that I know will chime in. I don't want to tag them specifically. I was hoping they would just see it because I don't want to feel like I'm attacking them or anything. But I would really like to hear from some of the people that I've come into contact with that are uh, um, um, in the political realm, that are actually in an office, and they're focusing on social issues and trying to bring change in these issues, and how it's considered they're in an office. It's
Mm.
a political office, but they're focused on what's happening in our backyard. They're dealing with human trafficking and stuff that a Christian should be able to get behind. They're dealing with the mistreatment, or the people not being educated properly. Things like that. How are we to engage those things? You know, and it not be about, like you said, Joe, a color, a candidate, a a certain party, or because people rep parties like teams, like
Yeah.
Yeah.
we're this team, we're that team. Well,
Yeah.
what if I don't care about the team? What if I care about the issue? And this issue is in my backyard, and this person is saying that we're going to come in and help with this issue.
Mm.
How do I separate? Okay, we're not voting this party, but we're working with this person to deal with this issue.
And
By
and
swimming
real,
upstream. Like,
yeah.
that's the thing. Why is this overcomplicated? We swim upstream all the time as pastors. That's literally the name of the game, is to swim upstream. We're saying it. We're dancing around the answer. We draw that distinction to talk about the social issue, whatever the social issue may be. Now, X candidate, right? And it could have two candidates. We'll say two candidates. We got one on the left and one on the right. And both of them are like, yeah, we recognize that this problem exists, that this social issue is a thing, right? Okay, I agree. Like, that's where I say I think the nuances are where you see, for those of you watching, um because I know some of I have heard from some folks along the way, since Let It Rip has been a thing, that at least the people who come in from my side, like, oh, y'all get a bit rowdy. And I was like, you haven't seen rowdy. um you know what I mean? Like, this is just dialogue, right? This is just having the conversation. When we are looking at these things, then do the thing that you're saying needs to be done. Don't care about, oh, okay, John Doe is is on the left, and he's repping this cause, and Jim Bob is on the right, and he's repping this cause, or Sally Jane, or whatever. It doesn't matter. Gender not a part of the conversation. That, what you're talking about, when I say that the responsibility is on our shoulders to dictate the pace of that conversation, understanding that yes, when we come forward and say this is a social issue, like we talked about, T, that doesn't stop people from running off with it from a political standpoint. That's not the name of the game. The name of the game is to not try and curtail that. Hopefully, if you have enough of these conversations, you can stop people from running off in a different direction and keep the topic about the topic. But then bring it back to the topic, bring it back to the conversation at hand. I don't know. I just, being on the East Coast and how hyper politicized everything is, you have to know how to handle yourself in these conversations. And I'm not saying that you guys don't have a version of it. Please don't hear what I'm not saying. I'm not saying that the East Coast is the only place that has the market cornered on having to be good at this type of dialogue and all of that kind of stuff. I'm just saying that if you are going to talk about a social issue, then you need to be ready to grab the reins and bring it back from devolving into a right versus left sort of conversation.
Right. Well, I'm gonna say, just to kind of even address our title, from the pulpit, my line is no. I'm just gonna, I guess I'll stand on something, stand on business. From the pulpit, Sunday, because that's what, if I'm hearing this pulpit language right, we're talking about people on the Sunday being preaching, right? You correct me if I'm wrong.
Mhm.
So that's what we're talking about. On Sunday, no, you only got 30 minutes. If you get lucky with that between praise and worship, you should be focusing on Christ. Now, people feel like the issues that are plaguing them, that become social to political people, like you're talking about, and you're saying this person is doing this, and so I'm just trying to help out in the regards of me being a Christian and looking out for these individual people, like the poor, the homeless, or whatever have you. If your convictions, this is why I think I like Brenda's comment, is the convictions, biblical convictions. Like, well, how do I vote for this? I think that's a separate conversation for outside the pulpit, because that is now you getting into one-on-one territory. If need be, you might need to set up classes possibly, because like I said, our church I don't know how we've done it, but I'm not surprised of how we've done it, because we lead with things in a biblical manner. Sunday, we focus on the Lord. We focus on your life in Christ and how you grow. We had things like morning coffee where people had questions, and we jumped in the Bible and we said, this is what your stance should be. If I had to give a cookie cutter, and this is what I'm saying, what makes this conversation hard is there's no way you're going to get cookie cutter. There's just no way that this line is not going to be unblurred. What you can do is make it a little bit more clearer. So to give it more clarity, if I had to give a suggestion, is to anybody, to church at large, to pastors listening, I think that time on Sunday is very limited. I know we want to put all of our emphasis on Sunday, but that could point to another streaming issue about what's important now in our churches with concern structure and actually communicating the word of God. So all the pressure being on Sunday, we'll probably be here for another couple hours, because some people think that Sunday is it go all be all. Some people think that, man, it's actually a life commitment. I'm probably one on that side. Like, you need stuff throughout the week where people can go to. You need discipleship. So, but just for sake of time, Sunday, you only got 30 minutes, bro. Focus on the Lord. Focus on the principles of God in the Bible and what God wants for his people and what God wants to accomplish to his people. Focus on things like that. Outside of that, there should be people that people are going to. It shouldn't just be pastors. I want to clarify that right now. There should be people who are equipped to deal with these issues that they can have conversations with. And yes, the pastor should be just as ready as the people that he's training to talk about how to get these biblical convictions taken care of. So I have a conviction about gun rights. I'll go ahead and just pick on gun rights. They're plaguing our school. People are getting shot. Most mass shootings are happening too frequently around us every day. I don't think guns are probable. Okay, let's have a conversation about that biblically. Let's see if we can get to a conclusion, right? You got that. Okay, my next step was, again, pointing to our church again. We have social justice workshops. My best friend does them, and she does them well. We're about to talk about pop culture. So I think churches should be having, if I had to give another suggestion, not saying all churches have to be like, I think you should have things like that where people can actually be educated and know what to do with these responsibilities. Because here's the deal, where a pastor, you said very clear, and I agree. When you said, I was like, that's to me, that was the 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 groundbreaking part of the conversation that I think I ain't gonna say we glossed over, but people have agendas. So whoever you get behind, who you gonna vote for, let's just be real, they have a agenda. Okay. And if I'm so glared with what I just want to change, you're not gonna see that people have their actual agendas because we're men. And so that's a case that is matter in itself. So that's why you need to be educated. Well, what am I getting behind? What agenda am I getting behind? I think that's the church's responsibility to teach us that. But that's my stance. Is, to me, yeah, the line's blurred because people are, again, these are passionate to people's heart. If we had to give a guideline across the board, that's what I think the guideline should be. 30 minutes, talk about Christ. Everything else, create pockets where people can go and talk about these things and be educated. But the problem is, not to keep this thing perpetuating, is we live in a society where, like you said, bro, social media. I don't know. I'm trying to let that comment go. I ain't gonna pick at you too hard, Joe. But about the social media comment. I'm like, I'm split on it. I'm like, yeah, it could be bad, but just as much as it's bad, it's also powerful for information, and it's always about how you use power. And so, because if that's the case, we need to get off stream. This is social media. We're doing social media right now. So you're going to say that's ineffective? That's social media. I think that's a good topic, though. I think we might need to talk about that. So that could be a next topic: is the dangers of social media. So, but
I don't think it's ineffective. I didn't say ineffective.
garbage is pretty bad.
Yeah, I did. And I stand by that because when you look at the science behind the comparisons and the facades and everything, when somebody creates a social media profile and things like that. Now, I'm going to use a giant asterisk towards guys like Ant and guys that just are on social media for the sake of a very singular specific reason and things like that. I'm talking about wide case majority, exactly, not hyper specific examples. So yeah, I mean the science backs it. Like that's just the reality. That more often than not, is it straight across the board? No, there's a reason why I'm still on social media. It's part of the ministry, and I said that. Mm-hmm. But the fact that with education and stuff like that, this is just the same as standing on a street corner. This is just the same as standing in a pulpit, just in a different setting. This is just a different platform for being able to do it. I recognize the lives that have been touched by the word of God by way of this platform and things like that. I recognize that entirely. That's why I still do it. Does that mean that I enjoy it? Does that mean that I think that this platform is wholly good? No, absolutely not. I think it's way more, way. I mean, terrible grammar. I don't know of a different way of saying this. It's way more bad than it is good. But again, like you said, that's a different conversation.
We're gonna table that too.
Yeah, I mean, so with this, reading it at face value without saying about this, about that, and like reading into it any one way or the other or anything else like that, I would be inclined to agree. Yeah, I think the key word in that is convictions, because that displays that that's not the same for everybody, and it doesn't stand on biblical tenets and things like that, like a straight through line and things like that, because that's where you start to get into I'm voting based off of what the Bible says and stuff like that. That's a messy spot to be in. That's a weird spot of town to be in. So I think biblical convictions is a good way of putting it. So I think that's good. G Berry, gave the other side of the definition of the
Social
difference
justice.
between these two: social justice, concept of fair and just relations between the individual and society. Zandra, we've got good morning. Good morning to you. Glad you are with us this morning. And then Brenda says, definitely get educated. We have candidates posing in the opposite parties, so to not be ignorant and do your research before you vote. Yeah, I mean, if you're
Yeah.
gonna vote and all that kind of stuff, and you're gonna get involved in that and
Yeah.
all of that, yeah, absolutely, be educated for
Right.
sure. I just wanted to get caught up real quick
No, it's
on
good.
that. So yeah, I mean, again, I think the nuancy parts are where we're drawing lines that differ from each other, to be perfectly honest. And I should say, for no, Andrew, you're still one of the you're still one of the
MVPs.
most active voices in our
Yeah.
chat, so you have nothing to be sorry about.
Right.
Still MVP.
So yeah, I mean, I think when you look at the realities of something like this, I think this is one of the very key areas where language matters. And I agree that people have agendas. We didn't gloss over it. We were just busy talking about other things when that first came up. But Ant, you're right. People do have agendas. That's why I say that politics aren't part of the conversation. Keep it to social issues and things like that. Because what are politicians? I'm going to say something else. I'll be the heel. That's fine. I'm cool with being the heavy today. I'll say another thing. What are politicians? Paid liars. I'll say it again. That's what they are.
All politicians?
Yes. That's what the game is, man. To ask politicians themselves. Like if they're not in front of the microphone, I have had conversations with many a politician that they will sit there and tell you that part of the game is telling people, phrasing things in a way that people want to hear it, even if they don't agree with it, and making a bunch of promises that they can't actually keep. So I want to stick it. I want to put an exclamation point on something that you said. What my goal is in having these conversations is to get past the agenda of it all.
Okay.
To get past the agenda of the person and to address the issue. Because if somebody's coming forward with a gun rights issue, if somebody's coming forward with the same-sex marriage issue, if somebody's coming with a racial equality issue, I'm just trying to touch on the pieces that we've salt and peppered throughout the entirety of this conversation. And I may have left something out, but I feel like my point stands. That if they're coming forward with, I don't know how to reconcile this topic. Now, they can frame this topic as a political thing. That's irrelevant to my point. My goal is to get past the agenda of the individual of the political candidacy or the political party or that like an overarching stance, and get to how do we manage talking about this topic from a biblical standpoint. I understand in saying that is swimming upstream, and I'm good with that, because the world doesn't want to draw that kind of fine line. Everything's just alt this, right this, left this, that, this color, that color. But I guess if I notch back the bravado of this, and I should say, I don't. When I make a title for an episode, especially with something like politics, ask Ant, dude, how long or how often when we do Kingdom on the Road, especially and a little less so now that we've been doing the Demystifying the Old Testament series because it's kind of on the rails built into it. When we were just doing topical sort of stuff, how often did it go here, there, and everywhere? It went all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever, like, yes, if we're holding to the thesis statement of this exact title and all that kind of stuff, I think all of us would agree that Sunday morning, or
Mhm.
I'll even use your point, T, because we all this is an ethic that we all stand behind, that church is about more than just coming to a building on Sunday morning.
Mhm.
That any of those times, any of those situations, no, like don't get involved in that there. You know what I mean? Like that being the vehicle for
Mhm.
it. So yeah, but I think when you're talking about this stuff, it has to go deeper than and wider and broader than just talking about pastors and Sunday morning. That's certainly part of it, because we as pastors dictate the culture of the church, whether we like it or not. That's people will follow the leader.
Hmm.
Oh, people follow the leader on a
I'm not
regular basis.
disagreeing. I'm just thinking about it.
Um, that but
Hmm.
but that that doesn't mean that we walk around ignorant. That doesn't mean that we don't know about what's going on in the world. And this is a line that I don't know as though you guys will agree with me on, and that's okay.
Mhm.
I knew going into this conversation that I was going to be the odd man out in this conversation. I knew it, and it's fine.
Oh, so far that's been me actually.
Oh
Right. I
no,
thought it was you.
absolutely not. Everybody's like, oh no, no, no,
That was me.
um, but
Y'all
but
are y'all. I feel like y'all are the extremes, and I'm
I'm,
kind of
but see,
whack in
that's
the middle.
and that's I guess I will forever be confused as to why what I'm saying has to be an extreme, or why what T is saying has to be an extreme, because I don't view him as extreme either. I don't think I would view extreme as if he came on here and was like, yo, the young people need to hear what leaders are thinking politically, so we need to
Mhm.
have I don't know, bi-week or bi-monthly or biannually check-ins to be like, this is what we believe politically. That I would say is extreme,
When
and
I
he's
say
not saying.
extreme, I base it off of the comment that there are some things that you vehemently disagree with. That means that's
Okay,
a
okay,
extreme
fair,
opposite end, right?
fair,
That
okay,
mean,
all right,
I mean, I mean,
I'll
sh-
buy
right?
that.
I suppose, but like I said from the start, mine's just to give you guys a perspective of my world. Doesn't mean I agree with
Right.
my world. I'm just giving you counter arguments that
Yeah,
people are doing. And I'm not trying to look at the chat, but, but I'm pretty sure more people gone here that I know for sure, like Pastor was talking about, gone, you will hear these counter
oh yeah,
arguments in leaps
Yeah.
and bounds.
yeah,
That's the only thing I'm doing because I'm just like, be honest with you, like I said, from the tile, we talked about the tile. I just gave my debris from the tile. I'm like,
So let me
yeah,
ask you guys this, because this is where I feel like I'm the odd man out. I actually have uh, um, uh, phone numbers in my phone of uh, you know, congresswoman, you
yeah,
know, police chief, right? Individuals like that, right? Because I've gotten to, have those opportunities to sit with those people and hear their heart about what they want to do in our communities, and how can we partner together to do those things. Sat with guys that were running for local offices and things like that. And so, like, when you know Joe was saying, well, all politicians are paid
Arlo.
liars, and I'm like, but there's individuals that I know personally, and I know their passion, I know their heart, I know their desire, to serve the Lord, and they believe that they can affect, and do work for the kingdom and preach the gospel in this local whatever arena that they're in. I was trying to, reach out to some of them, see if they would come on and actually try to talk about that, because, you know, I still, for me, it's a struggle to figure out the line,
Right.
because most of what, people would call politics boils down to addressing social issues, from these local, offices. So I'm trying to figure out, like, hey, when I preach Matthew 25, and he says, when I was hungry, you fed me.
Mhm.
When I was thirsty, you gave me something to drink. When I was naked, you clothed me. There are a lot of people that say that's political. I don't see it as political. I see it as social. But because people run on those platforms, run off of those,
Yep.
it's like it's hijacked. And it's like, okay, is that political or is that social? Is that gospel or is that, see, yeah, I hear you're talking about this, in this way, but this was in the Bible. This is
Yeah.
Jesus' platform. If we're gonna talk about, whose platform that is, that's Jesus' platform. And he does deal with, and even the term social justice, right?
Mhm.
Depending on who's using it,
Mhm.
Right.
has
Means
a
If you,
nuance to
vastly
it, right?
different
that's what I was gonna
things.
say, because they have
It,
agendas
it,
too.
it, it
Come
can be
on, I
just as
mean, because
different.
I talked about Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter had a whole agenda that got exposed, and it was pretty bad.
Yeah.
So
But
that's why
even when you say Black Lives Matter, are we talking about actual Black
Black
lives? Or are we
lives.
talking about the political
You
Right.
see
regime?
what I'm saying?
So
And to
this is
many
why I
people,
You
feel
see
like
what I'm saying?
this
Right.
is
Go ahead.
why I'm saying, for me, the line, that the figuring out that line and being able to hold to that line, because when you say something, people interpret, people hear what they want to hear, or what they have been taught to hear, or what they have been used to
Mhm.
hearing. And you saying, like, well, I'm not saying that, right? And will a person give you time
Mm-mm.
to unpack what you're actually saying before they
Mm-mm.
pass judgment on what you're
Mm-mm.
saying,
Mm-mm.
right?
I
that
mean,
part of it
I want to
that part of it
say,
is
mm,
not like I don't I think
What I
the
do with
shorthand
that?
answer is no. I think the shorthand answer is more often than not no. You hope you do. You hope,
mhm,
especially if you're talking about the
mhm,
context of the people around you, that you
mhm,
built up enough real estate, relationally, emotionally, all of that kind of stuff, that people will give you the chance to be able to actually fully articulate what you're saying. And I just real quick, I need to, okay, I'll walk back the whole everyone thing. Mainly where that stands fully and completely is born out of is the presidential candidacy. Generally, that when I talk about the presidential candidacy, and I talk about paid liars and all of that kind of stuff, generally, and there's like a threshold, right? I think, and part of where your focus is at a, I don't know if lower rung is but like
Local.
closer
You
to,
can say it this way,
yeah,
local,
local,
because as a
local, yeah, yeah,
pastor, I deal with community
right.
relations, right?
So that portion of it, okay. I as somebody who is, I on my, for as much as I've sat here and played the heavy in this conversation, there are people attached to my Facebook that are local politicians, local candidates, local representatives, um, school board members, the whole nine
Right,
yards.
right.
Um, so yeah, I okay, I can, sometimes you're the jerk of the situation, and sometimes when you're playing the heel, you
I
go a
don't
step
know
too
that.
far. So I'll say that. Yeah, it's fine. I went a step too far in saying all. When you get to a certain layer and level of politics and all of that kind of stuff, I think that's where you start to enter into the conversation
Mhm,
of
It gets
the
sketchy.
whole game is agendas and trying to win favor and all of that kind of stuff. Um, yeah, I think when you talk about these things, I guess to me, you can't play to every single contingency. Some people hear the things that we preach, any of them. There's so many of them. I had somebody reach out to me when I was going through Matthew and being like, "Man, are you gay?" For what you said, for some of the things, like, for real, like they drew those distinctions because of how I handle the Beatitudes and all of that kind of stuff. So yeah, I mean, that's, you can't and maybe this is the digital pastor in me. Maybe this is the digital ministry person in me, that you cannot play to the contingencies. You have to chart the course. And I think part of why this is a complicated conversation and why we can't nail down, yeah, okay. I've had people approach me because I have openly stated Black Lives Matter. Well, on the East Coast, you say that. And I'm sure elsewhere in the country too, you're saying where I'm at in my context, you say that. You step out of your house and you say that. You're gonna get, oh, so you hate cops, you hate this, like those kinds of things, and they can't. So many people have no idea that there is a difference between the movement and the organization.
Absolutely.
And that the best you can do
Right.
is try to educate, try to have conversations, try to have those things, and try to engage there. And some people are still going to think you're full of crap. Some people are still going to think that you're here, there, and everywhere. Okay. There's a long line of people who love me. There's a long line of people who hate me. It is what it is, man. Like, that's just the reality when you step in front of a microphone. It doesn't matter if it's in your pulpit. It doesn't matter if it's in your community. It doesn't matter if it's in front of thousands of people on a digital landscape. So I think trying to find that nuance is so individualistic that when we're talking anything more than individual conversations, I'm not going to say it's an impossibility, but you're going to spend a long time. And generally, when you figure something out, somebody's going to come along and break that paradigm of how you figured that out, because it's so situational.
I don't know. And it's one of your quotes that I live by when it comes to areas like this. And I don't know if you still feel this way, but I remember when you said it, I was like, that's it. People ain't gonna like it, but that's it. Is that, a lot of times we're looking to men to give justice, but men are imperfect. Imperfect men cannot give perfect justice.
Right.
Only God can give perfect justice. And this world is passing away. The world, God is doing away with this world. Okay. And he's going to bring in his rule, his government. Okay. When it's all said and done. Now, some people are like, well, that's just bleak. That means I shouldn't do nothing. No, I'm saying, right? Because that's extreme. Here we go with extreme. No, while you're here, get behind what God and Christ and his causes are. And they're clear. If you read the Bible, very clear. We just gave you Matthew 25 that gives you a whole things that Jesus stands on that we should be doing. Do those, whatever the Bible speaks, do. Whatever is not, if you want politicians to fix things in this world that are never going to be fixed, unfortunately, I hate to be so bleak, and it doesn't mean we've made strides or not strides. For every stride you make, there's a barrier. For every barrier being broken down, there's another one about to be put back up. And so we got to spend our energy effectively. Because at the end of the day, I think eternal salvation is the goal. Where are people going after this? Where are we trying to get people to understand about the Godhood of Jesus and Christ and the Holy Spirit and the things in their life that they're dealing with every day? I don't know. I think that's where I spend most of my time focusing on. But if I do get into these not arguments, but conversations of politics,
debates,
right? Social justice. I think this is my usual stance on it. We do have a new comment. Let's go ahead and get that real quick.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I think there's a modern viewpoint that has your political beliefs within your stances, communication, input, or how you jump into community services. I think there's a modern viewpoint that has your political beliefs with your stances, communication, input, or how you jump into community services. Yes. Sorry, I reread it again. I was pretty sure this is Kavan. What's up, man?
Yeah,
Good
it
morning.
does.
Wait, what did you say?
What did
Um,
he say?
the word that got
Professor Spock, right?
the word that got me was modern.
Modern.
Like,
Mhm.
I don't think it's modern. I think. See, and this is it, man.
Uh-oh.
This goes back to the social media
You sure
conversation.
did? He said it's not modern. Look at you starting
Come on.
stuff on the chat.
Come on, this is your fault. It's echo chambers. It turns the volume up on these things. Like that's the thing. Like that's where we have to, if you can derive a little bit of good out of something, but it also provides all this opportunity for bad. I don't know. Maybe I'm still a little utilitarian for my own good. I don't know. But I look at something like this, and to go back to what you were saying, T. I think we can all rest. I think we are all biblically founded enough to state, and I say that a little tongue in cheek because I know these men, and I know that they are biblically sound and theologically fundamental. That's a word. I'm gonna walk back that fundamental word real quick because I don't want to go down that rabbit hole. I don't want to. No sirree. No sirree, Bob. No, thank you. But that when we look at this situation, the goal is to stand for the things that Jesus stands for. And that when you look at something like this, unfortunately, cheaper comment.
I hated the reference.
That when you look at these things, and unfortunately, so often a political stance gets associated with just loving other people.
Yeah.
Like there's and that's like so I'm very keenly aware, Ant, of the reference that you made because I'm teaching tomorrow on community service. I've been spending this entire week working on a manuscript preaching on the spiritual practice of serving your community.
Right.
And the fact that this is something that should elicit joy. This is something that can be fun. This is something that can be enjoyable. And it doesn't have to look one size fits all. It doesn't have to look a certain way. You just have to be keenly aware of the needs of your community and the people that you are trying to serve. That can look like a sandwich. That can look like a hug. That can look like a hike. That can look a lot of different ways. But this, when you do that, any of these things, it doesn't have anything to do with the political thing. Now, the echo chambers of social media and the dumpster fire of the internet. I'm trying to needle T here for now because I know he's on. Like I'm trying to needle him a little bit, but that being said, I it's those echo chambers that perpetuate the misunderstanding that this has a single solitary thing to do with political. And this is where I say, when I say from the pulpit, I think in my mind when I wrote that title, it was taking that ethic of churches more than just the Sunday morning and extending it out, because from the pulpit, and if you say something right now, for all intents and purposes, you are saying it from the pulpit. Because there are people watching this that you are their pastor. T, if you say something right now, for all intents and purposes, you are saying it from the pulpit. Because there are people here, you are their pastor. Same thing for me. So when we engage with these political conversations and we're promoting a political stance, not a social stance. And it's our job as individuals to draw that distinction. And not everybody's going to agree with it. Just because we draw that distinction doesn't mean that other people are going to follow us in drawing that distinction. That's just the name of the game.
Yeah, I think ultimately, and TCU said it, and I'm gonna hang on to this word, the cause of Christ. What is his
Yeah.
cause?
Mhm.
You
Yeah.
said it in a different way, Joe, but you said the same thing. What is
Yeah.
it that, Jesus is placing as important? And I think when we do that, whether it threads the needle, whether it goes over to the other side and back again, we know
Right.
that this is where we're going. We are following the
Yeah.
cause of Christ, you know,
Yeah.
and
Mhm.
that may end you over on one side of the line and on the other side of the line, but you're not looking at the line.
Mm.
You're
Yeah.
looking at Christ.
Yeah.
You're
Mhm.
following him. You're saying this is what he desires. This is his heart. I mean, one of the most famous statements that Jesus made was at Luke 4, where he grabs the scroll of Isaiah, right, opens it up, and says, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he has anointed me to preach the gospel to the poor." Right?
Yeah.
To
Mm.
to to give recovery of sight to the blind, to set at liberty those who are captive, and set the oppressed free.
Mm.
So he comes preaching this message that can be hijacked in to use Kavan's term, modern, vernacular, as social justice. But this is
Yep.
just the gospel. This is just
Yeah.
the mission. This is just his cause. This is why he came into the world, to seek and save that which is lost. He said
Mhm.
the well don't need a physician, right?
Mm.
He said,
Sick dude.
if the sick do, the sick are the ones
Mhm.
that need. So he says, those are the people I'm going to, those are the people I'm reaching out to. And if my local, state, whatever, you know, uh, people who are in positions are focused on that, then they're just joining us. We're not joining them.
Yeah.
I mean, let's really think about it. They're joining the cause of Christ. We're not joining their political party, you know? And
Yeah.
I think that's, as I've been sitting here just listening, trying to work through, like, you know what? If they're about what Jesus is doing, then they're joining him. We're not joining them. We're not becoming,
Ooh.
this. Oh,
Yep.
all of a sudden
Mm.
I'm a this, or that. I'm blue, I'm red. I'm neither one.
Right.
So I
Right.
think
And
that's
that's
the
so,
through line, that if we hang on to that, we can get through.
and I think when you boil down a lot of the bits and satire of it all and all of that kind of stuff, I think that's largely why I stay out of the conversations. And I'm gonna, uh, I'm sure this is not going to shock anybody with how I've stated all of this and all of that. I don't vote, because frankly, my dear, I don't care.
Oh.
Scandalous.
Oh.
I know.
Oh.
I'm saying. Um, I'm not doing my God-given responsibility. All right.
Filthy human
Anyway,
being. This plane. This plane.
I knew somebody was going to get called a filthy human being. No, I'm playing. But that's part of why I don't, Ant, because that's exactly like how what I care about is exposing the Jesus of it all, not trying to latch onto a political figure because they somewhat stand for the things of Jesus and calling that a political stance. If again, if seriously, guys, for those of you that have been watching, go. I am not trying to condemn people who vote.
Mhm.
I don't care if you vote. Do what you got to do. Like, and if you vote, yeah, sure, hold your biblical convictions, like carry your biblical convictions into the voting booth and all of that kind of stuff. Okay, no problem. It's a choice, and I enact my choice. You can enact your choice, and all of that. Um, yeah, is my choice a little bit more extreme in some situations to some people? Yeah, yeah, because I've seen too much to engage in the rhetoric. That doesn't mean I'm uninformed, but I've seen too much to engage in the rhetoric. And so, one of the things that I want to highlight here for those of you guys watching and have been for the last stretch of time as we bring this thing in for a landing is, yeah, no, we don't. But there's a reason why, and it dictates to what the content of the conversation was. When all three of us can try and vie for the spot of the odd man out in this conversation and feeling like the odd duck. Um, I think anytime you have a conversation about political aspects, unless you are in an echo chamber like on social media, it has a way of eliciting feelings of feeling like you don't belong in the conversation, like you're the odd one out, like you should just be quiet and go away. I think that's just the reality of it. And so, one of the things that I want to highlight here for anybody who struggles with having these conversations or feels like they can't have these conversations with people, even if there is somebody who is willing to have those conversations, like a pastor in your life or somebody trusted and things like that. This is what it means to engage, disagree, agree, and it's all good. This red light goes off. We're not going to be at each other's throats. This not like, oh, you said this and you did this and you did that. No. So this is what it means to have discourse, guys. This is what it means to have conversation and dip in and dip out and all of that. We just happen to be having it with the red light on. And that's always the thesis statement of Let It Rip. But I want to highlight this in particular because it has such a way of bringing about extreme perspectives and things like that. So I open the floor to you, gentlemen, for closing remarks before we wrap this thing up. We'll start with you, T. What do you got?
Man, I don't know, man. I feel like what I said is what I said. I ain't trying to be like Doja Cat.
What I said, man.
I have spoken.
You know, I'm spoken. I think you're heathing for not voting. Period. You know, you're horrible. It's like I'll vote either. I was gonna say I'll vote either. So that's why I laugh at that because I actually don't vote either. Nah, man. If I had to close out with something, is at the end of the day, the Christ of Christ, the cause of Christ. What is that? Get behind that, and I think that will lead you in what you should stand for or what you should not stand for. So that's my closing remark. I just thought that was profound when I heard it, because that's what I heard out of that statement that Apostle made a couple of years ago. I was like, that makes sense, you know.
Yeah.
So that's my thing. That's my closing remark.
Yeah, no, I agree wholeheartedly, and I'm gonna stick to that because as we work through it, just looking for that thing to guide you through these discussions, guide you through these issues and challenges. It's like, okay, what is the cause of Christ? What is his focus? And people will make it seem like it's only heaven, but it wasn't.
Mm-mm.
He actually cared about the common man. He cared about the person who was pushed aside, the person who was forgotten about, the person who was overlooked, the person who was actually pushed out. You know, there was a man in John chapter 9 that he healed, and then after he healed him, the Pharisees in the synagogue put the man out.
Mm.
Jesus found the man outside. That's the kind of Jesus that we follow. He will go find somebody who's been put out and bring them in. And so, you know, if that's political for some people, if that, you know, social justice for some people, you can call it what you want. That's the Jesus that we're following, that he will pick up that person. He will grab that individual and bring them in. He will, you know, put clothes on a person's back, food in their stomach, water when they're thirsty. He'll go visit them when they're locked up. Just the stuff that we're like, oh yeah, that's a great thing. No, it's more than a great thing. It's actually a
Yeah.
Christ thing. And so, yeah, that's that's my closing remarks.
Yeah, and that's kind of, I think, a good point to end on. I think that's kind of where we come back to when we talk about these things, or at least we should be. Is, we can talk about the finer points of whether or not we think that this has a realm of conversation here or there, or we should use this platform or that platform or this or that. We can talk about all that, but at the end of the day, we come back to, what are the things that Jesus stood for? What are the things that Jesus did? What are the things that Jesus said and taught? And understanding the character of Christ, because by way of that we understand the character of God, and that's more profound than anything that a political figure, even if what the political figure says resembles something that Jesus stood for, taking it back to what Jesus stands for is is the top priority. So, guys, thank you all for joining us this morning. We are here every week, 9:30 a.m. Eastern, uh, on Saturday mornings. You can catch us, on the Kingdom on the Road Facebook page, yes, but YouTube channel, as well as these gentlemen's channels as well. Guys, we appreciate you. Um, Coming soon, these will be, in podcast form as well. So if you want to go back and listen to the streams in audio form, soon they will be available there as well. But guys, until next time, remember, you are prayed for and you are loved deeply.